I recently found this awesome looking 4060X laptop on eBay for a pretty decent price, which is kind of rare these days. The laptop is in really good shape except for the fact that the CMOS battery is dead and it doesn't boot anymore. So in this part of the Eric experiment, we'll try to replace the CMOS battery and get this thing booting again with one of these SD to ID adapters so we can run some cool software on it. So let's go, let's do it. Let's just do it. I did try to find a bit more information about this laptop, but with it being super generic, I didn't have much luck. The eBay ad stated that it's from the late 80s or early 90s, which is believable given that's around the time period that the 486 processor was released. But it's kinda sad that I couldn't find much more info about it. As I mentioned earlier, I can't boot this machine from the hard drive, which is actually fine. I'm not going to bother with it because even if I manage to get it working again somehow, it's probably not going to last long, so a solid state solution such as the SD to ID adapter is definitely the best option here. So let's open this thing to see what we're dealing with. First, let's remove the battery, which is this huge thing on the back. This thing is totally unnecessary because it doesn't seem to be able to hold a charge anymore. Also, things seem a bit loose inside of it, which worries me a bit. These screw things are what keep the battery attached to the laptop. Alright, let's put it aside and start opening it. I actually tried to open this thing once before, so I know that I need to start by these two screws which release the keyboard. There we go, let's put this aside. Here's the hard drive, and it is a 3.5-inch one, which gives me some hope that this process is going to be fairly painless. Let's unscrew it to take it out. It's not coming out, so let's remove the top of the case to see if it gets a bit easier. Trying to be really careful here. And there we go. Now, this is both interesting and annoying. This hard drive has two power connectors, a normal Molex one and this other small one. They probably chose not to use the Molex because of the space constraints, which will require me to modify the power cable if I want to power the SD to ID adapter. Anyways, that's a later problem. Let me just remove this bracket from the hard drive. And let's keep disassembling the laptop because we need to see what the situation is with the CMOS battery. Now let's remove this thing that seems to be the power module. And here it is. It looks like it is one of those nasty NiCad batteries that love to leak. I hope it hasn't caused any damage. To check that, we'll have to get better access to the motherboard. This seems to be the graphics card. It has a Cirrus Logic chipset. I only realized now that the top part of the case is fully disconnected, which means I can put it away. Here we go. This is actually one of the easiest laptops I have ever had to take apart. Now this is interesting. These seem to be normal 30-pin SIM memory modules, but look at how they are connected to the motherboard. Now let's remove the CMOS battery. It has started to leak, but luckily it doesn't seem to have caused any actual damage. Here's the bastard. Now let's give this area a bit of a clean so we don't have issues with it in the future. So now I was thinking about what I should do next because I did want to install a new CMOS battery. After doing some research, there are a few options, like installing another one of these batteries, replacing it with normal AA batteries, or using normal CR2032 coin batteries. The last two options using diodes to prevent the batteries from being charged. The problem was that the stuff I found on the internet was geared towards desktop motherboards, a lot of them having connectors for external batteries, which makes things a lot easier. But this is a laptop, and the suggestions that seemed like they could be applied to it didn't inspire me too much confidence. So I went on the Australian Vintage Computer Collectors group on Facebook to ask their opinion, and some people suggested that if I'm only going to use a laptop occasionally, they recommend just skip having a CMOS battery altogether if reconfiguring the laptop every time I use it is not too much of a hassle. And it's true, I probably won't use this laptop very often, and the only thing I will have to change in the BIOS is the hard drive config, so I decided just to leave the laptop as is. With that, let's start reassembling it. I don't know why I put this bracket in now. It's probably easier to screw it to the graphics card first. Let's reconnect the power module. Then we can reconnect the graphics card. And screw everything again. Cool, now we have to do something about the hard drive power cable. I don't have another hard drive that has that connector, so I'll try to replace the connector on the cable with a Molex one. That should be fine space-wise because the SD to IDE adapter is way smaller than a hard drive. So let's prepare the cable. It's kinda crazy that I'm doing all of this and I don't even know if this laptop will accept the SD to IDE adapter. I'm really hoping it does. This process is a bit tedious, but basically I'm just installing the Molex connector and then testing it with the multimeter to see if it's working. And there we go, we're ready to test it now. I will try the cable with the original hard drive first because it does have a Molex connector and I can check if I can access it even though it's defective. If it shows up on F-disk, then we're good. And yeah, it seems to be fine. Now that I can power normal hard drives, I can finally see if this laptop will work with the SD to IDE adapter. Let's use what IDE to see if we can detect it, and yeah, it seems to have been detected. Now let's do a test fit here with the keyboard and uh-oh. The Molex on the SD to IDE adapter seems too tall. I won't be able to reattach the keyboard with it. Okay, new plan. Because I don't have a floppy power connector available, I'll solder the power wires directly to the SD to IDE adapter and be done with it. Alright, now, because I don't want this thing to be loose inside of the laptop, I need to figure out a way to attach it properly. I found this 3.5-inch mount bracket made specifically for the SD to IDE adapter on Thingiverse that will allow us to mount it just like the old hard drive. So let's 3D print it! While that happens, let me quickly tell you about our first ever sponsor, PCBWay. If you are working on an electronics project, chances are you need prototype and professional printed circuit boards done for it. Well, with options for standard, advanced, and flex PCBs, not only has PCBWay been the go-to place for many engineers and people in the retro gaming and retro computing communities to get their PCBs done for over a decade, they also offer many other services such as 3D printing, CNC machining, assembly, and more. You can get everything for your project in one place, all of that with very quick turnaround times. If that's that sounds like the kind of service you need, make sure to check them out. Thank you PCBWay for supporting channels like this one, and let's get back to the video. Alright, it seems to fit perfectly. Let's mount it then. We can use the original bracket just like we would with the original hard drive. This is looking pretty good. Now let's screw the top of the case again. And then we can screw the mount bracket to the bottom of the case, and then reconnect the keyboard. And that's pretty much it. We can now try to get the software side of things working. Now, I don't know if you noticed there, but I put a 16GB SD card in the laptop, but this thing is from a time period where computers wouldn't accept more than 500MB hard drives. There are ways to get around that with something called dynamic drive overlay though. These are basically pieces of software that trick your BIOS into thinking you have a hard drive they understand, and then via software it can boot those drives and load larger partitions. I was trying to use Easy Drive, which is a piece of software that allows us to do that, and the setup seemed to go just fine. I could set up all of the partitions and stuff. But after the setup was done, the laptop seemed like it was having trouble booting from the hard drive and it was getting stuck. I tried to format the drive with a DOS boot disk, but no luck there. So I decided to go back to my original plan. Yeah, this wasn't my original plan. I learned about dynamic drive overlay after I started getting this stuff for this video. No, my original plan was to use this 128MB SD card, which is definitely within the limits of this laptop. The only issue is that this BIOS is very limited and there's no way I can set the exact geometry of the SD card, so I had to pick one that was as close as possible and hope for the best. Now we can try to install Windows 95 on this thing, which is the version that I want to run. I really love these black and white passive matrix displays. I really love how they look. Don't get me wrong, the image quality is terrible, but there's something about them, something about how the color shifts when I move around that really pleases me. It probably has to do with nostalgia. This laptop reminds me a lot of a laptop that my uncle gave me around 1999. That laptop was old at that point and it didn't have a hard drive anymore, so it was useless to my uncle. But for my 11-year-old self, it was awesome, even if it meant just using a floppy disk to boot and run some basic DOS software and games. And the screen was very similar to this one. The post, the BIOS, and the DOS prompt screens also had a white background with black text. I loved that laptop, but eventually I completely broke it because I also loved disassembling and reassembling stuff. Cool, the setup went really well, but it seems like the laptop isn't booting. I can load Windows in safe mode though, which is really strange and makes me think it's a driver related thing. Well, it doesn't matter. I'm probably better off going with something simpler, probably more appropriate for this laptop. So instead of Windows 95, I'm gonna install DOS 6.22 and Windows 3.11. The most challenging part here was not being able to use the Gotek floppy disk emulator. I do have official MS-DOS 6.22 disks, but they don't work anymore, so I had to find working floppy disks so I could write the disk images to install it. Now that DOS is installed, I will do something that I should have done before. I know this computer is a 486DX with 8MB of RAM, but I don't know what the speed is. Well, let's have a look at it. It seems to be an Intel 486DX 33 MHz. Cool. Now let's get Windows installed. I'll just copy the install files straight to the SD card and install it from there. Alright, let's fast forward this a bit. Alright, this is a lot easier. I'll tell you something, of all of the fun and nostalgic things in retro computing, using floppy disks is definitely not one of them. Aside from the sound floppy drives made when they are reading disks, they are so flaky they are not fun to work with at all. Alright, there we go, Windows 3.11 is installed. Man, I love how this looks.
Sure, it's ugly, but it's my kind of ugly. There's something about Windows 3.11 running on a monochromatic LCD like this that just brings me joy.
I don't think I need to bother with installing the drivers for the graphics card because this display only runs 640 by 480 in black and white. Setting this graphics card to run at anything over 16 colors will probably only result in smoother grayscale gradients, so it would be a bit of a waste of time. Anyway, you might be wondering now, can we run games on this? Well, this is a monochromatic passive matrix display, which means that it's not the best for, you know, things moving around on the screen. But this laptop really reminds me of that old laptop I just mentioned earlier, and I used to play a few games on that. One of them is my favorite game of all time, Lemmings. Like all of the other games I used to play on that laptop, Lemmings ran out of a single floppy disk, which made things a lot easier. I just had to boot the laptop with the Windows 98 floppy disk, and then I would replace it with the Lemmings floppy disk, which I believe was the original one at that time. I didn't actually have a mouse connected to that laptop, so I'd use the keyboard to play it like I'm doing here. Same with Battle Chess. I'm not a huge chess fan, nor am I any good at it, but it was a game and it ran on my old laptop, so I'll take it. And at this point, this game is highly nostalgic to me, that's why I have it in the box. Another game that I used to play on that laptop, but sadly I don't have the box for it, is Indy 500. That was another game that I could run off of a single floppy disk, and it was a lot of fun at that time. It's funny how our memory works. In my mind, these games looked a lot better in this type of screen, but they probably looked just like this on that old laptop. All of these games, by the way, are games that I featured in my versatile Pentium MMX video, and the reason those games are there is because I used to play them on that laptop. I mean, except for Lemmings, I used to play that one at my cousin's place way before that. Now, what I didn't feature in the Pentium MMX video, but I used to play on that laptop as well, was Pokemon Gold. Now, you might be wondering why I'm playing the Japanese version here. Well, I'm pretty sure this is the version that I used to play on that old laptop because I remember not being able to read the characters on the screen. Also, the English ROM is 2 megabytes and the Japanese ROM is 1, so if I wanted to fit that in one floppy disk, that would have to be the 1, because it barely fits in one floppy disk with the emulator, which is the no cache GMB. Anyways, being able to play this game regardless of the language was special to me because I was super into Pokemon around that time, and my parents didn't have the money to buy me a Game Boy, so the fact that I could play it on that laptop was awesome. And there you have it. I feel really happy that I managed to get this laptop on eBay for a fair price, and being able to get it working again was a lot of fun. As I said before, I love how early LCD screens look. The way the color shifts makes me happy, even if I would find that unacceptable on a modern LCD. And there's something special about being able to revisit those pieces of software on this hardware. But that's it for now. I hope you liked this video. If you did, make sure to click on the like button, and if you enjoy content around retro stuff, electronics and whatnot, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any parts of the Eric experiment. Thanks for watching.